But I'm really lucky to be joined on stage by two other phenomenal mycologists who have inspired me endlessly and played a big role in the book I just wrote. One is Alan Rockefeller, distinguished mycologist, community science member, teacher. Alan has been, mainstay in the mycology Bay Area myco scene for 10, 15 years now, more? 25 years, yeah. If there's anything in mycology, Alan has probably done it. Damon is one of the most fascinating men on the planet that I've ever met. He travels, he takes photos, he fixes sinks, he feeds rabbits, he pees on his cacti. Both these guys are very fun to follow on social media. Alan_Rockefeller and Damon Tighe, Tighe is his last name, so I recommend following both of them. But we're going to have kind of an open discussion about community science and what people contribute and see as community science, and really I want this to be super interactive. I don't want to talk that much. I really just want to let panelists talk. But if you guys have questions, curiosities, whatever, bring them up, because we're here to chat, and you have a lot of brain power in between what's going on stage. So let's get going. Alan, do you want to say a quick summary about what you guys each want to give a quick intro on what you do and what you bring to community mycology, maybe how you envision that?
I'm Alan Rockefeller. I've been looking for mushrooms since about 2001, and I do a lot of photography, microscope work, DNA barcoding, and recently I've been doing a lot of programming, making code that figures stuff out about mushrooms.
I'm Damon Tighe. I do a lot of iNaturalist observational work. So iNat, if you're not familiar, is an app that you can take pictures of any living organism, upload into a global database. It was built here in Oakland. I do a lot there. I've been doing a lot of DNA barcoding of mushrooms for the last, 10 years or so. And a lot of home cultivation, not necessarily all the ones that people are interested in here, but figuring out how to just transform your local waste streams into food and then into compost. And I'm finally at the point where I can do it all with just sunlight now, using a solar cooker and stuff. So it's just been fun to play on low-tech techniques.
Very cool. Do you guys have questions for us about community mycology, or would you just prefer to hear us kind of riff on subjects like DNA sequencing or cultivation or strain manipulation, that kind of thing?
Actually, could I do an origin story real quick?
Absolutely, please.
I have two origin
yes.
stories when it comes to
Go
mushrooms.
for it.
So I was never really interested in mushrooms until I did a long backpacking trip. I did the Jaw Muir Trail a couple years after college, and I'd never done a long backpacking trip before, so ran out of food, and then remembered seeing really big mushrooms and being like, I wish I knew. And that was kind of my gateway. And then my second gateway, and maybe more to the community science portion of this, and this speaks to kind of how community science works, it's a community. I actually met Alan Rockefeller.
We made it!
Well, welcome, Tony and Hernan. Okay, Damon, keep going. We'll introduce you guys in a second.
So I've been putting photographs of mushrooms up on this website called Flickr, and this random guy that sounded like a fake name contacted me and said, hey, that psilocybe you found in Oakland Park, could you bring it to me? And I was like, this is totally a cop. And I looked up his name, and I saw that he had been actually doing some what looked like community science stuff, and I went, all right, I'll go ahead and risk it. I'll go to this sketchy, place in San Francisco that totally seems like this would be where his thing would happen. And I walk in, Alan's there, and he takes this mushroom and then busts out a microscope, does microscopy on it, and kind of nails it down to a species. And I went, wow, that's something I'd love to learn how to do. And so, a lot of community science, right, happens by somebody just offering an arm out and going like, hey, let me just take you to the next step. And so thank you, Alan, for doing that 15, 18 years ago, something like that. Yeah, thanks. Why don't you go ahead?
That's a great summary, because a lot of this is community mycology is about elevating the people around you and helping them get to the next step. And I think in all those ways, everyone on this stage does that with their community and the people around them. So with that, I want to introduce Hernan Castro. Hey guys. And Tony Alvarez, right?
Thanks
so this is Desert Alchemist, if you guys want to follow him. And
Shroomy
Walkabout, right. So we just gave really quick intros on ourselves. Do you want to give a 30-second, who you are, where you came from, what you do, and maybe, if you want, a quick origin story?
Sure. My name is Tony Alvarez. I live in the South Bay, Los Gatos area. My hobbies include obviously finding mushrooms and identifying, and also like plants and botany. That's really big in my world. My origin story, I've always been super fascinated with nature. I've always been into science. Life kind of takes us places that we didn't really want to be, and then we come back to our kid. So I kind of found my child spirit, started messing with microscopes, learning different mushrooms in the forest, different plants, and it's been a great ride ever since. So I just really took some friends out, and Shrimmy Walkabouts was born. Yeah, so it's my story.
Is this working? Okay. My name is Hernan Castro. I am also known as Desert Alchemist. Mycology, I'm amateur mycologist from Arizona, and I started maybe about 2011 growing mushrooms. And the reason I got into mushrooms is because of their medicinal properties. Was doing some research at the University of Arizona, and my father suffered a stroke while I was going to college, and I decided to dive into stroke recovery research, and I ended up finding some promising studies on mushrooms that eventually helped my father and helped him recover from his strokes, and that's how I got into mycology. I do a lot of educational videos like Gordon, mycology related, and what else? Sequence validator.
Cool, thanks. Alan, you want to give us a quick origin story, or just any kind of story that gets you excited?
Oh, I started out looking for mushrooms. I think it was Christmas Day 2001. And I walked out there, and there's mushrooms everywhere. Because it's the peak of the mushroom season here, and I thought that somewhere there must be people out there that knew what all these things were, which ones were edible and psychedelic and new species, and so I started paying closer attention to them after that.
Very cool, and the rest is history. So, a quick question for you guys. Alan and Damon mentioned it, and honestly, all of us are part of this, but we're here to discuss community mycology, which means mycology that everybody has access to. And has anyone seen Ratatouille? There's a Disney movie about a cooking rat. There's a line in that chef that, like, everybody can be a chef. And I like to sort of think the same thing with mycology, that, like, everybody can be a mycologist. Can everybody do microscopy? Can everyone do sequencing? Can everyone, like, identify a mushroom by just looking at it? No. But you can get there because the resources to learn all of those things are accessible within the mycology community. And that's really different from so many other like scientific disciplines, because literally within like 6 months of finding your first mushroom to like right down the road, you can become like a sequence validator, or like take a photography class from Alan, do a sequencing thing with Damon, take a walk with Tony, go visit Hernan, and like suddenly you're now contributing to the field in a way that like you're at a really high level after really not being in it that long. But one of the primary tools that we use for community mycology is called iNaturalist. So who here has an iNaturalist account? Okay. I hope everyone in this room walks out later today and downloads iNaturalist on your phone and starts an account. It's a little weird because they ask for your phone number, but don't worry, they're not going to steal your info. It's just like part of how the app works. Does anyone up here want to talk about like an experience with iNaturalist that kind of like changed things for them? Like, I was in New Zealand and I had no clue of any mushroom that I was looking at, and I found this app iNaturalist, and suddenly I was like my own naturalist guy that I could just take a photo and be like, I think that's what it is. So it was transformative for me. I don't know. You guys have thoughts, feelings?
It's like a Pokedex. Yep. If you play Pokemon growing up, it's exactly like that. It's the gateway into the mushroom world that you'll get addicted after you start collecting different species.
Is it a red thing? Okay. Okay.
I bet you if you put them up on iNat right now, or even take iNat's AI to it, it'll give you at least a species guess. And so possibly a puffball, possibly though an immature classless ruber, the red stinkhorn phage fungus, because somebody else did have one right out here today too. Yep. And I just iNatted, I think like 4 fungi on the way in from the BART station. I mean, if you pull up iNaturalist and like look in downtown Oakland, you'll be like, what the hell? I didn't realize this place is so diverse.
Well, you'll realize that Damon logged most of them too.
Oh, yeah, I still live around the corner from here, which helps. But there's like 30,000 observations of organisms just at Lake Merritt, and most of that's water. So So you can imagine like the granularity of what you can see here. And I mean, that's where I kind of cut my teeth, was literally across the street from here. And so if you walk over to Lake Merritt and pull up iNaturalist, you can probably be able to identify just about anything there because somebody's done it in the past.
How many new species did you find in that tiny little car park that you checked out for like 12 years?
Definitely a handful. And that's one of the cool things, too, is iNaturalist. If you haven't played with it, it connects you as somebody who's just beginning, who might not know anything about the thing you're photographing, to people that are like, amateurs that are really passionate, to academics that like want to study it. So, I mean, I've got at least one new species of fungus from Lake Merritt because I was just taking pictures of ladybugs, and I'd upload it to iNat, and some guy from Harvard was like, can you send me one of those because that ladybug has a fungal STD on it? And I was like, really? Oh, you're right. Okay, yeah, sure, I'll go out there and throw one of those in a tube. Sent it out, and he like identified it and was like, oh yeah, this is like, it's an undescribed species at this point. I'll work it up in my next monograph of this group. And so, I mean, it really connects you from, I don't know what that is, I'm just taking a picture of it, to people who are like, I know exactly what that is and it's undescribed, let's go deep. So it's a really wonderful platform. And I think one of the things that doesn't get spoken about it enough is it allows you to prime yourself for what might be there, which allows you to see stuff. So whenever I go for a hike, first thing I do is I bring up iNaturalist and I'd be like, what did other people see in this area? And if I see that, and I just have those images in my head, as soon as I walk out, I start seeing that stuff. Like, any of you guys hunt morels? All right, if you're a morel hunter, you know the biggest trick in your book is to look at a morel before you go out in the field. You get that pattern recognition, and all of a sudden they start popping out. If you don't do that, you're walking around for an hour, like stepping on them and stuff, and don't even know. So a little bit of priming, and iNaturalist can really help you with that. Is really, really good for like investigating a new space.
And you can also use iNaturalist to make like a little localized field guide. So you can just like make a field guide for whatever is on this one trail. And then just like show me all the plants, all the mushrooms, all the insects that have ever been seen on this trail. And then when you walk out there, you'll start seeing all those things. Also, sometimes I'll be in the middle of nowhere and I'll pull up iNaturalist and I'll be like, wow, Damon stood in this exact spot like 12 years ago.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of my main tricks, and I don't mean to blow your spot, but if I'm going hiking somewhere, you can filter by organism, you can filter by all sorts of different things, but you can also filter by users. So I will literally just look up Damon or Alan and be like, oh, here's a trail, they walked there, I might as well go there, So.
And that's fine. Like, blow up my spots. Like, I put that data out there so people will use it and get excited to go and just look. Because the biggest game for me in all of this is just getting more people connected with the biodiversity around them. You go out there and you get connected and you're like, I want to be able to come back to this place. Much better chance that when something's going down and that place is like in danger, you're going to want to be one of the people that stands up and says, hey, I don't want to see this place disappear.
That's my favorite thing about iNat is that you can, wherever you go, if you're traveling, you can just hit up the iNat, explore, see what's popping in different places. Most of the time, that's how I find like really cool stuff, is by rating other people's iNats and checking it out.
Yeah, most observations have some sort of timestamp, so it's,
Yeah.
you know what season. Also, iNat also.
Yes.
Yeah. What it has with any organism you're looking at, it'll have like the months in which it's been cited, which is really helpful too. If you're like, I want to find morels, but it's December, you're like, oh, they don't fruit right now, like.
Yeah, and it's like it has like I don't know, maybe a 70% success rate, the algorithm to ID your mushrooms. If it gets it wrong, one of us will go on there and correct it within a week. So.
Who's had an observation corrected by Alan before? Yeah, Alan is one of the most prolific. I mean, Alan and Damon, but like
I don't know
much.
when Alan sleeps.
Yeah.
Right? It's really impressive how much identifiers do on iNaturalist, Alan being one of the top ones for a fun guy. One thing to also be aware of, just because like if you're like, oh, but I'm worried about blowing up my spot, like I'm going to put data on there, you can always obscure data as well too. So you can do obscure, and it's like, I don't know, like a 10-mile radius per se, it'll just drop a random point and be like, it's somewhere out there. So you can do that. So you can put up sensitive species. You don't want to blow up your porcini spot maybe, or your cyan spot. But you can still have that data out there so people know, like, oh, this is about the time of year they fruit and things like that. And then you can also see your own point and be like, oh, that's when I saw it then, which is also very, very helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of gatekeepers, so sometimes you'll go to the spot and it's like not the right habitat, and you'll go on a wild goose chase. So you have to
Do beware, because some of those, when you obscure an observation, it'll just put a random pin somewhere. So like if you go to a spot and you're like, middle of the lake doesn't seem like where a mushroom's growing, it's probably just automatically there. I think, aren't psilocybe species automatically obscured?
Cyanescens is automatically obscured, I think, in California, but a lot of the other ones aren't. So if anybody wants to go blow up my ovid spots today, you can type in ovids, go to the lake, and see where they've been fruiting for the last, 10 years or so. But yeah, I mean, some stuff's obscured, some stuff isn't. Yeah.
Do you guys have iNaturalist accounts? Is it the same screen name as your other things, or? Tony?
Me, yes.
Yeah. Say it's also Shroomy Wonka. Okay, so all of us have the same username. So again, you can follow us not only on social media, but also iNaturalist, which is yet another form of social media. But this one's a little more like interesting to use. So.
If you ever have questions on there too, I mean, you can always just message me direct and be like, hey, I'm trying to do this. I'm just trying to learn, because the more people I feel that are involved in that, the bigger community we have of understanding like fruiting behaviors and things like that. Because you have to remember, like, for the most part, mushrooms have not got a lot of academic interest or funding, and so a lot of mycology has been done by people outside of academia using tools that are developed, right? And iNaturalist is definitely one of the stronger tools we have right now. So the more of you that know how to use it and are excited to use it, the better off we all are as far as learning what's going on out there.
And the timestamp is key. Like that is the biggest help of all. Like that timestamp is like, just you look at it and you're like, okay, we're not in that month yet. Just let me be patient. These are the general areas, and just go for it. Go out and see what you can find.
And also, Stephen Russell is offering free DNA sequencing for any mushroom that's been found in California. And that's a really good way to discover new species and figure out exactly what you find. So if you see any mushrooms in California, you should put them on iNaturalist and then dry them and then write the iNaturalist observation number on that bag. And then you just pop them in the mail to Michigan, and in a couple months you get the DNA sequence will come up and somebody will tell you what kind of mushroom you found. And it's a really cool thing, because the more DNA sequences there are on iNaturalist, the more valuable all of the other DNA sequences are.
And that's mycoda.com. Don't just randomly send it to Michigan. You'll get a real address there and send it in.
State.
But the beauty about that too is like there's nothing like a good hubris breaker in life, and DNA sequencing combined with iNaturalist is a great hubris breaker, because you're like, I know what I'm looking at, and you send it in, and you're like, back in my small space, good.
Way off.
And the cool thing is, I don't think any of us, we're not mycology. We don't have mycology degrees, do we? Yeah. Anybody can do it. We're all, I guess, amateurs.
And that's what I was talking about. It's like the barrier to entry with mycology is so low, and that's partially because of these community science tools, and because like literally you just taking your dog for a walk and taking a picture of something can lead to like discovery of a new species, especially if you do just the very basic steps of like taking a picture, drying it out, and like doing just the tiniest bit of cataloging. You can do a lot more complicated cataloging, and I don't know if anyone wants to talk to like what it takes to like do a full write-up on a mushroom, but in a very basic sense, all you gotta do is like take a decent picture, upload it to iNat, and then like write down, connect that physical sample to what's on iNat, and then send it in for sequencing. And there's a few different places that do it, but Mycota Labs is a really good one. So, do you guys want to talk at all about like documentation or what it is to like find and sort of like have because you've all done this to some degree, right? I actually don't. I find shit occasionally. I throw it at a friend, but I'm very lazy, but I like tapping stuff. So you guys are more into the science part. Go ahead.
Aside from iNaturalist, like my goal here, I've already kind of fallen in love with mushrooms, but I mean iNaturalist is yet another way. I just kind of love to hear you speak to the various ways of just entering into the world of fungi outside of iNaturalist, which is a great one. I've already put that on my to-do.
Group forums. There's lots of group forums. There's lots of San Francisco Mycological Society. There's so many different societies around your local area, wherever you live, regarding mushrooms. Getting involved with people that are in that community will get you linked into certain hikes that are in certain spots, and you'll start to learn as you go. But community is everything in mycology.
Another good website is shroomery.org.
Yeah.
And so that one, they have these forums, so it's shroomery.org/forums, and there's one for mushroom hunting and identification. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the most active mushroom discussion forum off of outside of social media, so you don't have to worry about being banned for posting magic mushrooms or anything like that. It's been around for like 20 years, so it's almost like an old school BBS type thing, but most of those just kind of disappeared, but that's the one that's still really active.
Yeah, I wouldn't do Reddit. That's just people arguing the entire time, and what is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's 5 or 6 Bay Area myco clubs, and then there's like mycelial mass meetups, and there's also like Mushroom Observer, which is a little more complicated than iNaturalist. So it's like once you're like a little further down the road, that's good. But also, like as I tell everyone, just go and look for mushrooms. Like the barrier isn't there. You just have to find something and be curious. And then really, it's just about following some of these like really basic steps that help you kind of like contextualize it all. So.
And for mushrooms, because they're so ephemeral, one thing I would really suggest is find a place that you can go walk frequently. And walk that place and look for differences every time. And that's where you really start to get a big holistic view of what it's like to be a fungus. Because you'll walk that space for a year and you only see it up twice. But you'll learn over the course of time, like the patterns of like when they come up, why they come up. Some things I could set a clock to, like I know it's going to be up April 1 every year, right here. Other things I don't know because it's a completely different species and it will come up based upon changes in humidity and temperature, not what the plant roots are doing and things like that. So find a place you can walk over and over is one of the biggest things I would say as far as just getting that big holistic view of what mushrooms are doing.
Most of us do walks. We lead forays, every season. So going with, I guess, an expert is a good way to learn the basics, and then you can build on that. And they'll teach you like the right seasons, the right weather, and all that. I think that's the best way to get started off of iNat.
There's also just people have vastly different reasons and entry points for mushrooms. This is a conference about psychedelics, so a lot of people here are probably interested in psychedelics. But sometimes it's, I got into it just because I liked eating mushrooms. I wanted to forage, so I wanted to find food in the woods. Some people get really into it because like the photography element. And anyone here seen Alan's photos? Like they're stunning, but your photography has evolved massively over the last 20 years, right? You went from sort of grainy cell phone pictures to like absolute like museum level quality stuff that should be printed out as huge murals. But he's got like, has anyone been to one of Alan's photography workshops? Okay, you should go to them if you get a chance because they're phenomenal and you can learn so much. But again, like your motivations are different, but everyone, as long as you're curious, just do it essentially, So.
That's one thing I'd really suggest is try to go out, if you can, with different experts, like over the course of time, and you will see even the same space radically different. Like I just had one of those experiences 2 weeks ago. There was a truffle expert who was in town. We took her out to a place that I've hunted for the last 15 years. Holy crap. I was like, are we even in the same place? Like you're seeing the landscape totally different than me. She pulled up more truffles in one day than I've seen my entire life out there. I mean, it's just, to go out with somebody that has a different point of view really, really eye-opening.
So if you go on a walk with Damon, you'll be face down, ass up the entire time because you're going to look at like really tiny. You probably won't go further than about 1 or 2 logs. So. And then, I mean, some of you guys have been absolutely incredible places to go mushroom hunting, or just we live in the Bay Area. So, like, do you guys want to talk about some of the different environments you've gone to and hunted mushrooms, Alan?
I've been spending a lot of time in South America recently, and there are a lot of really good mushrooms in South America. Lots of very colorful things, lots of psilocybe. It's like a completely different place, but it's still part of America, so it's like not as foreign as somewhere like Asia would be. So it's a super nice place to go. I usually go to Ecuador or Colombia, or occasionally Brazil.
And a lot of places that I go, Alan's been to most places. Wherever I go, except for Alaska, haven't been there, right?
Well, but I mean, you're in Arizona, so like talk about that. Like none of us has been mushroom hunting in the mountains. Does anyone think that Arizona's a good place for mushrooms?
I have. That was actually going to be my one. I was going to be like, go to Arizona, go out there with Hernan. I mean, it is. I know when somebody tells you go to Arizona look for mushrooms, what are all you guys think in the back of your head? You're like, what? Desert? Well, you go there during monsoon season in the southeast corner of Arizona. You get these sky islands. It is like going to like the neotropics, and it is just dense with big fungi. And from there, I'll let this man take it over.
And Damon and Hart are there for like a week, and they find like all the like rarest stuff. I don't know how you guys do it. You guys cover a lot of ground, I think, when you go down there. But yeah, in Arizona we have the desert where there's maybe like, I don't know, 20 or so different species of desert fungi. Not a lot of diversity there, but if you go up to the mountains, these sky islands, you can find every habitat from Arizona to Canada in one mountain, and they're all unique from each other. Last week I just found a garicon in one of them, which is weird. But you can find a lot of diversity of fungi. A lot of new species are being discovered in southern Arizona, and that's what I've been focusing on every summer. And last year, we found a couple novel species. It's pretty cool. A lot of diversity. I don't know if it's the most diverse, but I kind of want to say it is. I don't know. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah, there's a ton of mushrooms in Arizona. It's some of the best mushroom hunting I've ever seen in my life has been September in Arizona.
And part of that's like oak diversity out there is like puts California to shame. And what you see is these, for like my long vision look, you see a lot of these refuges from when an oak forest used to connect to the East Coast. So you'll see a lot of like what look like East Coast species like hanging out in Arizona. Like, has anybody ever seen like frost bolete? This big red bolete with crazy reticulation. You already feel like you're on drugs and you're looking at it. You're like, oh my God. And I was like, I'll never get out the East Coast probably to see it. And then it's in Arizona, like a long day's drive away from here. It's pretty cool out there.
Yeah, and there's what was I gonna say? Yeah, there's mushrooms from the East Coast, mushrooms from the West Coast, mushrooms, some from the Midwest. We have like cordyceps. We have morels in the desert, like in 300 feet elevation, or 3,000 feet elevation in the desert. As long as there's water, there's mushrooms. They seem to be everywhere down there, and here as well. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in California. I ain't gonna lie. We got it good here.
But where like you've been around California, right? It's not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just all around California. I did some in Idaho, which was interesting. It was the wrong month. I was there real estate speculating, and it was the wrong month.
Were you trying to hunt like mountain habitat or like?
It was kind of mountainy, but it was near the Tetons, I believe. It was, I guess, the northeast corner. So it was interesting, but like I said, California is where it's at for me. I've been up north in Humboldt. I've been all through Humboldt County, north Crescent City, and just found truffles and all kinds of stuff that I've never found anywhere. I've seen pictures of things, and I'm just like, yeah, score, and try to set my watch to it. And that's the other part of foraging. Everybody has the same idea, and people will go and kind of take a little too much. I try to do as ethically as possible, just take what I need. But yeah, it's been a good ride in California, and I'm looking forward to getting to Arizona and South America and doing all this stuff soon. So.
Love that, yeah. And I mean, I think part of this panel is supposed to talk a little bit about ethics, and we don't need to go too deep into it, but basically the main thing is usually like, don't take too much, don't get too greedy, leave some behind.
Take what you need.
Yeah, try not to take super old ones or super young ones,
And spread the ones you love.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Anyone else have thoughts on ethics or anything else you want to say about it?
Well, the main thing is to not let people cut down the forest.
That's main,
so if you pick every single mushroom in the whole forest, in a couple weeks they'll all come back next time it rains. But if they cut down the forest, then it'll take a couple hundred years for them to come back. So if Donald Trump gets elected, then he'll probably clear cut all of the forests in California, and that would be a shame. So vote for Kamala Harris.
I love it.
We are truly in the darkest timeline.
The whole etiquette thing is a touchy subject, especially on forums. There's people on both sides of the aisle, and if you try to stand up for, preservation, people will trample you, and it's.
The one thing I'll say is everyone could be a little bit nicer to each other online, And there's a lot of gatekeeping with mushrooms, particularly morels, like more than any other mushroom. So like, I have a video of morels I posted a couple days ago that it's going wild because all these people are like, it doesn't have hollow stems, it's not a morel. And you're like, no, it clearly is. It's just, it's just people say the most inane, stupid things because like the only time of year they ever go to hunt mushrooms is like just morels. So that's the only mushroom they know anything about. And usually they don't know that much. But either way, there is a rule of thumb, which is also you shouldn't really say rule of thumb. Do you guys know what rule of thumb is? It was like the size of like a stick that you could beat kids or a husband or whatever. Like don't say that. Anyhow, the general guidelines for foraging is that you should leave something like at least like half of what you find behind, or at least a third, and like older and younger, and like again, all that kind of stuff. But like Alan said, the real threat to mushrooms is not human foraging, because we've been doing that for thousands of years. And unlike hunting, like we've hunted species to extinction. We haven't hunted chanterelles and morels to extinction. They're still around. What would make them go extinct is complete loss of habitat. And that's where, like, also as community members, we can advocate for caring about spaces that we want to see protected, right? And that's the thing that even as a like amateur mycologist or someone who's just curious, you want to have as many like good, healthy ecosystems around as possible. So
Yeah, and the more people you can get into mushroom hunting, the more people there are that care about the forests.
Yes.
And so just getting people started is a really good way to do it. And a really good way to get people started is to give them a mushroom spot. And so if you tell them where the mushrooms are exactly, they'll go out there, and then they'll go off somewhere else the next week. And, it's a really good way just to encourage people to actually leave their house, is if you give them an exact spot. Also, like if you post an exact spot online, people, might just like kind of go there and get everything. But if you post like 10,000 exact spots online, then it spreads out everybody among a bunch of places. So that's why I don't obscure any of my iNaturalist coordinates. I just leave them all up there, and it was about 30,000 exact coordinates that I have there, and it's all accurate to within a few feet. So if people want to know where a certain mushroom grows, they can just go there.
And just to touch on the tree subject, I did watch a documentary recently from a German filmmaker called Intelligent Trees, which was incredible, and it talks all about the loss of tree habitat and how that affects literally everything, and how they're trying to change the way they do things in Germany to make sure that the mycelial mat isn't damaged and things can return normally. So I think if you get a chance to check it out, please do so. It's a pertinent issue within the mycology world for sure.
One of the rules, Gordon mentioned the etiquette. It's not like actual rules, but we try to encourage it because there are people who will go out there and they'll take like all the boletes if they can. So during my walks, I will encourage people, to only take what they need. If they're not going to use it, don't take it. Take from 1/3 up to half, maybe leave the rest behind. We try to encourage that. And we like to tell people to spread the word, because there are people who do get, a little too excited, and they will take everything. So
Also on my walks, I encourage cleaning up trash. Absolutely, every single time. If you have a bag for mushrooms, you should have a bag for picking up trash.
You can bring a paper bag for mushrooms and a plastic bag for trash.
Yep. I mean, I've gone to some of the most beautiful parks and seen somebody spread out a McDonald's big breakfast all over the redwood floor. I'm like, I picked it up and did my part, but it just, we all need to take care of where we live across the board.
And you can also spread the spores. Like if you find a bunch of psilocybe, you can take the caps and just put them into a bottle of water, shake it up really good, and dump that on fresh wood chips, and they'll come up there in subsequent years. And then the stem bases, if you just pick the mushrooms and then clip the stem bases off, if you plant those stem bases in fresh wood chips, they'll come up. And usually, you come back the next year and the original spot you found is gone, but all those other little spots that you started a couple hundred meters away, they will be fruiting like all over the place there. And you can do that with porcini too. Like if you find a porcini that's too old to bring home, just drop kick it, and it'll spread those spores all over the forest. You just got to pay close attention to the mushrooms that you pick. And so probably the most important thing to pay attention to is how the gills change color as the spores mature. So something like a Galerina looks pretty close to a psilocybe when it's young, but once they get older, the psilocybe gills will turn purple because the spores are purple, whereas a deadly Galerina gill will turn orange because the spores are orange. So it's being able to pay attention to how those gills are changing color as the maturity changes. Kind of lets you know what the spore color is without actually having to spend hours making a spore print, but also just paying attention to the texture, the odor, the flavor, the habitat. You kind of pay attention to just pay close attention to every single mushroom. And people that are paying attention never get poisoned. It's always people that make no effort at all to identify their mushrooms that get poisoned. Poisonous plants, a lot of times they taste bad. Like they're poisonous, but the poisonous mushrooms taste just fine. And if you cook them up, they taste great. Not any better or worse than a psychedelic or an edible mushroom, but the mushrooms do not taste poisonous. You just have to know what they are.
And I would encourage to do the spore printing, especially if you're just kind of starting. And the other benefit to that, I still spore print probably all the psychoactive ones I see, not because I'm like, oh, what is this, but because I like to dry them nice and slow. And then at the end, I've got this print left over. It gives me an extra confirmation. Oh, yeah, that's who it is. It's got the right color. And then I've got all these spore prints that I can wipe off into a bottle of water and go for a walk around the neighborhood and, help my friends out. And so there's like multiple lines of benefit to that, too. The one thing I would just think about with picking like urban psychoactive species is like look for also indicators of like what's going on in that area as far as like trash and waste, right? You probably don't want to be eating off of a giant lead pile, things like that. And I mean, this is one of the great things I think about ingesting things you find in the wild. It makes you really care about the health of the environment around you because you are intimately connected to that. And we constantly think we are not. We're breathing the air all the time. We're eating all these things. But it really comes into focus when you're like picking something out of the soil and being like, I am going to put that in my body. So, think about the environment they're in as well.
I think that's really important because especially in this kind of forum, you have a lot of questions like, what does this mushroom do for me, right? Whether it's psychedelic, it's medicinal, it's whatever. And I want to get people to shift their thinking to say, what can I do for this mushroom? So that's a big thing of like what we're talking about, of like spreading little bits of mycelium, spreading the spores around, and I've heard Alan say this multiple times, like what's the best thing you can do with a mushroom? Drop kick it or throw it as far as you can pitch it because they're trying to spread their spores. So help them get around, right? And you can, even when you're picking, you can do stuff like, make sure the spores are in an open basket or container or mesh bag or something like that. But like that goes further too. It's like caring for your environment, planting trees, uprooting invasive plants, anything, picking up trash. It's like, how can we help, right? It's not just what things can do for us. It's what can we do as our personal contributions to not just our people community, but our nature community.
Well, it also makes it good for us.
Oh, okay. Question maker? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a friend who told me if I find a mushroom growing in cow dung, that's 100% legit.
No, that is very wrong.
Wow.
I mean, you can eat it, but I wouldn't expect any results, especially in California.
Yeah, we don't. Our psilocybe out here don't generally grow in dung. So there's other things that grow in dung, and I don't know if any of them are necessarily.
Are there any
poisonous?
toxic ones in our dung
I've
group?
never heard of a toxic dung mushroom, but there's so many. There's got to be some. But in general, mushrooms that grow on dung are safe to eat. But in California, our only dung psilocybin mushroom is Paneolus cinctulus. And that'll come out in the spring. Sometimes there'll be a big pile of horse manure, and you'll see 10,000 of these mushrooms all over it. They're pretty easy to identify. They're like the warmer weather, so you don't really see them in the middle of the mushroom season when everything else
And if you don't
is there.
have access to dung for them, you can literally just go to Home Depot and buy Kellogg's like organic soil, and then just let that sit in the sun. And it seems like most of those bags have centiculus in there. And they're beautiful. They're beautiful mushrooms in the right habitat.
Oh, sorry, go. Say something?
Question.
What are some other mushrooms that contain psilocybin outside the genus?
So California has a really big diversity of psilocybin mushrooms, but the most common one is Gymnopilus luteifolius. And so that starts out bright purple cap, and then it turns bright yellow with the bright orange spores. And it's really common in wood chip landscaping and also just like on logs and stuff. And it doesn't just fruit in the very middle of winter when psilocybe fruits. Sometimes it comes out in the spring or any time of the mushroom season. But those paneolus are also really common, especially in lawns. Like around April or May, you look for lawns that are very green, and that's an indication that they have been watered a whole lot. So the more they water it, the more likely mushrooms are to come out. So yeah, definitely the Paneolus cinctulus in lawns. And then we have Pluteus phaeocyanopus and Pluteus americanus. So these are Pluteus mushrooms that contain psilocybin. Phaeocyanopus was described from San Mateo County. So it's kind of around this area, kind of like a little brown Pluteus that stains blue. And then americanus is found up in the mountains around Yosemite. But yeah, there's definitely quite a few different psilocybin mushrooms that are outside of psilocybe.
There's inocybe too, right?
Yeah.
Can you eat those?
Inocybe are toxic, huh?
So like Paneolus cinctulus, if you find it in dung, is usually about the same strength as Psilocybe cubensis. And then if you find it in grass, it'll be about half as strong. Gymnopilus luteifolius is about 1/3 as strong. So I ate 9 grams dry and I saw colors, but I'd probably eat 15 grams dry next time.
Isn't that bitter?
It's very bitter, yeah. Not as bad as San Pedro.
Somebody brought up a question about, like, people will tell you, oh, if it has pores, it's not poisonous, or if it's like, there's no sure way to tell whether a mushroom is edible or not. So don't believe any of those little sayings that people spread.
There's exceptions to every single one.
Even oxidation, when it turns blue, even that can be misconstrued as a poison point. It's not always the case.
All right, so going back to iNaturalist, there's one function we didn't talk about that I frickin' love. There's this thing called projects. And essentially, you can go on there and select your favorite mushroom, or your favorite season, or your county, or whatever, and create a project that says, show me all the chicken woods in California over the last 5 years. Or you can say, I live in this county, and I want to see all the mushrooms that fruit here in March. And you can make these very specific little curated collections of stuff that automatically populate with all the data that's uploaded to iNaturalist. And I got really nerdy while I was working on my book and made little things for like all of the Ascomycete fruiting bodies in North America, or like all the boletes in North America. Because I was trying to get a handle on what the hell is here and what's the most common. And iNat has the problem of being biased by the people who upload stuff. So if you look around the Bay Area, like the most observed things tend to be like turkey tail and Styrium and Amanita muscaria. And while those things are very common, they're not the most common. It's just what people take pictures of and upload. So there is that bias. But I guess I was going to ask you guys, were you to create a project and you wanted to like really nerdily look at one type of mushroom or one habitat, or like what if you were to make an iNat project right now? I'm gonna give you a second to think about this. Like, is there something you'd want to like focus on or like hyper obsess about? This is in place of me asking you what's your favorite mushroom, because that's a tired question. So what's your favorite iNat project?
Well, I think, since the rainy season is coming to an end, but there are spots in California that get mushrooms year-round, it would be good to do a project or just a search for gilled mushrooms, so the agaricales that come up in June, July, August, September, before the rains hit in the fall. And then those are going to be the fog drip areas and the irrigated areas. So like the first ridge after the ocean, the fog hits these trees and drops a lot of moisture there all year round. And so you go to these places, a lot of them are like in Point Reyes or Pacifica, or here in Oakland there's some. And you go there and, if like any day that's cloudy in the summer, you go there and the ground is super wet because they've been gathering a ton of dew. And you can just make iNaturalist really easily show you exactly where those summer mushroom spots are.
I mean, I'll jump in there because I already have a project that I love and we're going to promote it, which is the UV fluorescent one. And so a lot of the data in there is mushrooms. And you just basically get, a little black light torch and go out in the forest, and you'll be surprised at how many things have strong UV fluorescence. What does it mean? We're still all very unsure about that, but boy, having more data will definitely help. And it's really helpful for some fungal groups too. Like I have a hard time telling Diconica mushrooms from anything else a lot of times in the field, but you hit them with a UV light and all of a sudden they've got bright red gills. Nothing else has bright red UV fluorescence quite like them. But if I had to build a new project, there's a pet project that Christian Schwartz has asked for years. We did a little bit of work on it, which is understanding fruiting body persistence. So I go out and I see a mushroom up, I take a picture of it, and I'm going to try and visit that maybe every day for a week and see how long does that fruiting body stay up by itself and how long does it take for it to go away. And that should be really different species to species, right? Like we just had a random little rain event a day and a half ago here in Oakland. And so I guarantee you walk around Lake Merritt right now, you'll find a lot of these like coprinus mushrooms that are like, oh, a little bit of moisture, I am up. And within 24 hours, 48 hours, they are gone. Where some of these other things will just hang out for months. So that would be my pet project.
That's a cool one. Yeah, because I'd like to know like the lifespan of fungi before they start rotting.
I haven't started a project yet. I plan on doing one regarding microscopy and some, maybe the turkey tail and the gilled polypore. I read a report recently that a guy did sequencing on it and actually found the same properties as turkey tail in the gilled polypore.
The Trametes betulina? Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes.
everywhere. That's way more, even more common than turkey tails. So.
Right. So I think that's an interesting thing to kind of look into and try to study a little bit more for myself.
Yeah, the medicinal aspect is we're barely tapping into it. There's so many mushrooms that probably have lots of compounds that could probably save or help a lot of people. We're just tapping into that. That's what I would love to get into. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, the profile, all the different potentially medicinal, and in theory, like almost every mushroom has some medicinal quality.
Yeah.
In my book, people always ask, is it edible? Yes, no. And the quick answer is edibility is not a binary. It's not like a yes or a no, it's a spectrum, right? So I did like what I called like a 5-star system, because I think if I say this is a 5-star edible, it's incredible edible, people are gonna be like, yeah, I wanna eat that. And if you're like 1 star, like you can put this in your mouth, you're not gonna die, but I don't know why you'd wanna eat this. People are like, oh, okay, maybe I won't put it in my mouth. And I've never seen so many adults act like toddlers than on a mushroom foray when people are like, can I eat that? And you're like, but why? It's literally growing on poop, why do you wanna eat it? There's our poop guy. Here you go. I don't remember if I was going to say something. I don't know. You guys have thoughts? Anything else you want to say? Anyone have questions?
Even the poisonous mushrooms have some medicinal-ish uses, like mushrooms that contain alpha-ammonidin. We use that in labs to basically splice DNA and break it up into sections.
They're even looking at like amatoxins as a cancer treatment. That does not mean you should go out and eat a death cap if you have cancer. Bad idea. But it's about delivering, a medicine. A poison is a medicine depending on like the dosage and like where it's going. And in that same sense, like anything you eat could potentially be medicinal, because all mushroom fiber has potentially medicinal properties. But it's, where grading on that spectrum and like what is medicine and how do you use it is really important to understand as well, which is why Hernan's project is probably a great idea. So, Damon, you had something?
I was going to say, and within that, I mean, understanding your dose is like poison or medicine also comes down to set and setting a lot. And I think anybody that's ingested some of the mushrooms, at a conference like this understands that, and all medicines are kind of like that, right? Everything, it's like, what have you ingested in the days before? That's going to interact with what you're ingesting with your edible, things like that. And so there's a big, a lot of variables that can factor into what is medicine besides just the compound.
So we talked about it very briefly earlier, but I have cooked and eaten various types of psilocybe species, partially on recommendations from people on this stage, and they don't lose much potency. You guys want to speak at all about like consumption psilocybe in unusual ways, possibly cooking or unusual species you may have tried? Since we're at a conference,
never
might as well
cooked
talk
with
about
it, but taken a lot of psilocybe and work with it still, and it's been an interesting kind of opener for me, just in a lot of ways. Opening up my spirit, my mind, and it kind of led me to a lot of things I'm doing now. So shout out to Merritt College. I'm in the microscopy program there. Yep. So learning more about the microscopy component and really diving into the science aspect of mushrooms and the science aspect of even using psilocin and psilocybe. So it's really it's been interesting for me. So I'm looking forward to cooking potentially with some
In my experience, they hit you a
fresh
lot.
or dried.
Fresh.
Okay.
And they hit you fast, but they don't last quite as long. But it's like the peak is.
The tea is good. Like the tea is also really, really nice.
Tea is similar. You're churning that psilocybin and psilocin makes it absorb faster, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Well, I know, I'm just getting excited because I'm hearing all of this and I'm thinking like, okay, we got heat, we got acid going on. Like, we need more community science chemists around to really understand like what's going on, because you could be transforming some of the other components in there to something else. You could be making some interesting tryptamines and maybe are hitting you differently. And there's a lot of really good questions in the chemistry portion of mycology that are still only have a couple of hands working on them. And so anybody that's got a little bit of leaning that direction, please come talk to me. I'd love to help connect you with those that are already there and help build up that portion of our community.
I have a question for Alan. What's the thermal degradation for psilocybin?
Well, nobody really knows what the thermal degradation for psilocybin is. You can measure at what temperature it gets destroyed when you throw it in the oven, and that's really hot, like 350 Celsius. But that doesn't mean it doesn't start breaking down pretty rapidly at lower temperatures as well. There's been some studies that show that once it gets above about 120 Celsius, it starts to break down pretty quick. So when you're cooking your food, typically they don't get above 100 because otherwise, if the mushroom has any water at all in it, it would have boiled it away. So you're not going to destroy the psilocybin by cooking. But a lot of the psilocybes are very delicious mushrooms when you do cook them up, and I think they would be in every supermarket in the gourmet section if they weren't psychoactive as well.
Let's do it!
so, Alan, what's the most interesting species you have bioassayed? Psilocybe species you've bioassayed, which means to eat.
I don't know. I try all of them, I guess. But, like Psilocybe aztecorum in Mexico is pretty neat. But usually when I'm out looking for mushrooms, I'm so busy studying them that I don't really have time to eat them. And a lot of times the really rare ones, you save them for science. You don't just eat it, because if you want to get high, you could just eat a cube.
I collect all the different psilocybes that I find in different places, and I have like in little glass displays. So I have a little collection. So I don't get to eat them all the time because sometimes I only find one. But if I find two or more, then I'll try that out.
Well, I think that's one of the things that doesn't get highlighted enough too about kind of the psychoactive fungi world is like, unlike cannabis, you see people celebrating a diversity of species, not just taking one and trying to like breed it out into kind of weird stuff. I mean, that's happening with cubes. But you have this potential to work with all of this evolutionary fodder that's already out there, right? You have all those psilocybes and you have all those other genera that are also producing psilocin and psilocybin and all the other tryptamines. And so there's like this huge palette of discovery that can still take place, which is one of the really exciting things about being in mycology is there's so many low-hanging fruit for you to go after.
Right, because with cannabis you have between 1 and 3 species, depending on who you ask. But psilocybin, you probably have at least 200 species that you can work with, and those different species have different psilocybin gene clusters that make the alkaloids. So, all cubes are very likely to be very similar, and that's all there is on the black market. But these different species, like Zapotecorum or Subtropicalis, they have very different chemical profiles than a cubensis will.
A quick question: is there a psilocybe truffle? There's got to be, right?
There is.
Yeah,
Well,
like
sort of.
Psilocybe tamponensis, Mexicana, Hochschigenii, those will make truffles. And then like Psilocybe warroi,
But
never
like,
really opens
I'm
up.
not talking about like sclerotia. Can anyone want to talk about the difference between sclerotia versus a truffle? Anyone feel like tackling that one? I can do it.
Like sclerotia is just a mutation, right? That psilocybe undergoes when it's like living in a really, really hot environment. And
Well, it's, yeah, like
just forms.
so a lot of mushrooms that when they're not going to form a mushroom, they'll form a little kind of like hard storage body. I'm like a mushroom potato. It's kind of that's what a sclerotia is, and this is the thing that like morels need to form sclerotia to form a fruiting body. If anyone knows what chaga is, that's like another form of sclerotia. I know Damon has posted multiple photos of like certain mushrooms that form these kind of little things, and it stores a lot of like energy for a mushroom to be fruited out of. Whereas a truffle, like sclerotia, is not a fruiting body. it's more like a storage thing. An actual truffle, and we're not talking like in Amsterdam they call sclerotia truffles, so there's confusion between the two. But a truffle is a mushroom that's evolved to like live underground and be stinky, so animals will dig it up. So.
Oh, I think the difference is the truffles develop spores inside of the fruiting body, and they rely on the squirrels to eat them. I don't think the psilocybe ones do that, but I'm not sure.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Okay. But there is a secotioid.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them that never really open up, so they kind of look like puffballs.
Yeah. So there's things that are like truffle-esque, I guess.
And just to be nerdy about the sclerotia really quick, because it is really cool biology, a lot of them produce these sclerotias because they're in an environment that, say, has fire and things like that. And so the sclerotia allows you to hide out down in the soil a bit. And so when a fire happens, you can then fruit really quick. Because I know most people don't think about Florida, like where Tampanensis came from, as being a fire habitat, but Florida is very much so a fire carved out habitat. In the Oakland Hills right now, we have a couple of fires that happened last fall. And if you go through those right now, there's all these cool polyporous mushrooms coming up out of the soil that have huge sclerotias. So there's some really cool biology by why you would want to put a giant potato of yourself in the ground so you can wait out, wait for the top to get cleared, and now you can get out and throw your spores really easily.
Dope.
Question.
Why do you think mushrooms contain psilocybin?
That's a good question. We don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows. And that's one thing I love about mushrooms is that anytime you ask a question that starts with the word why, the answer is always the same. No one knows.
I mean, I've heard multiple explanations that like it's an antioxidant because that's part of like the blue staining. Also, the argument that maybe it's an anti-herbivory compound to like deter animals from eating it. But then like the follow-up to that is like, well, it doesn't really hit you till like 2 hours later, so it's not going to stop. It's not bitter. It's not going to stop you from eating it immediately.
Yeah, there's all kinds of theories. People say that psilocybin is meant to bind to our receptors in the brain, and they evolved for us to eat them specifically. But yeah, there's all kinds of different theories out there.
I mean, honestly, the way we're going to get there is people coming up with hypotheses and trying to test it, which has been really hard for a long period of time, right? But now that kind of some regulations are changing in places, like someone could start asking those questions. I mean, grow a bin of cubes here, grow a bin over here, let slugs at this one. Do you see different fruiting behaviors? Do you see the slugs not go for certain things? You know, I mean, there's like a whole bunch of like experiments that could be designed to start chipping away at some of these hypotheses, and maybe we could get there and understand why these compounds are being produced and why they're so useful, because they're getting moved around between genera. Like, it's not like this thing is just happens to be there for one group. It seems to be a very useful series of compounds that are getting moved around.
And yeah, the psilocybin gene cluster has gone across genetic categories of things. It's all saprotrophic mushrooms, I believe. There's not any ectomycorrhizal mushrooms.
The inosabes.
Oh, inosabir, are those are mycorrhizal? Okay, cool. I did not know that. Dope.
Can you eat those?
Yeah.
Inosabes? I thought those were toxic.
Muscarine, no?
No, there's about 70% of inosabe contain the toxin muscarine, and then about 29% are edible, and then 1% contains psilocybin, and none of the inosabe that make psilocybin also make the muscarine.
Probably still a better idea to not go out and hunt inosabie, but
Yeah, inosabie is dangerous.
it's there. Yeah, what's up?
What about evolutionary mushrooms, like the development of mushrooms over time, from like thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of years ago? Where does it come up on like a species? Where does it come from?
So, I mean, fungi in general, about like, there was what's called a universal last common ancestor kind of thing. So about, let's say 2 billion years ago, eukaryotes emerged where a bacteria ate an archaea or an archaea ate a bacteria, something like that. Two of these like small bacteria-like things combined to form a bigger cell. That then turned into plants about like 1.5 billion years ago. And then animals and fungi split off about 1 billion years ago. So there's been, you'll hear that like fungi and animals are more similar to each other than they are to plants, and that's true, but there's still been like 1 billion years worth of evolution between them. Mushrooms themselves probably emerged something like 200 million years ago, and like if you look at the evolution of fungi, it's been step in step with plants, with animals, with everything else on the planet. So they're like interacting, and a lot of times they're like antagonistic, where they're actually parasitizing something, but over time, a parasitic relationship becomes like a mycorrhizal relationship. They become synergistic. So that's a little bit about like But I mean, a lot of the mushrooms we know have evolved in the last like 50 million years, kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them started like they're mobile, like the spores have like tails and they move, but then they evolved to become more sedentary.
The original, the OG fungi were little swimmy aquatic things you would not recognize as fungi. They're called chytrids. In fact, Damon found a chytrid the other day on a really cool plant. Usually chytrids are associated with like disease of amphibians, but there are all sorts of cool chytrids that are out like in aquatic habitats, either in like actual aquatic systems or just in liquid on plants. Like.
Yeah, if you go look at any of the erodium plants right now, like fillery, it's like a weed that you see everywhere. Usually this month in California, if you see ones that are kind of red, if you get down close, you'll see that sometimes they'll have these red blisters all over them, and they have a chytrid fungus attacking the plant. They look like little jewels. They're pretty cool.
It's on fillery?
It's on fillery.
Your yard is fucking full of that shit.
You probably had chytrid in your yard.
I've been weeding it for the last week.
Do a video on it.
Do we know how long ago psilocybe?
So psilocybin mushrooms have been around for about 30 million years, and then humans have been around for about 300,000 years, so they definitely didn't evolve for us.
That's a great point. Do we know anything about the psilocybin gene cluster, and like has it gone through like genomic doubling, or is there any? Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, cool. I don't know, Alan. Any last thoughts on like the evolution of that gene cluster, or maybe how it's jumped around?
Yeah, nobody really knows why the psilocybin gene cluster has jumped into so many different genera. But also, maybe that's just really common, but maybe like most chemicals that are produced by these genes that jump around, we just don't notice them because they don't make us hallucinate, and we just pay attention to psilocybin more than we pay attention to other chemicals. But if we paid attention to some random chemical in mushrooms, maybe we'd see the same thing as far as it jumping around with horizontal gene transfer. But in any case, there's definitely been these genes that have been transferred horizontally from one organism directly to another one without actually evolving. And that can happen with bacteria or fungi or even physically. You put like different mushrooms in the blender, when they come back together, they'll kind of exchange a lot of genes around like that. And then different species of psilocybe mushrooms have different configurations of the gene cluster. They have different numbers of repeats of the genes. The genes that make psilocybin are in different orders in different species. So there's definitely a lot of diversity in these genes that produce psilocybin.
And I mean, it's a great time to be a biohacker in that space because, I mean, tools like CRISPR are really democratizing how easy it is to do gene editing. And you could say, try to replicate more of that gene cluster in a mushroom you're growing. You could upregulate the production of that gene cluster as far as expression goes. I mean, there's a lot of like low-hanging fruit if I was a cultivator and a little bit of a biotech background that I would be really trying to chomp into right now because those tools are incredibly accessible all of a sudden.
Yeah, you could put psilocybin genes into a tomato or an apple, or you could put 99% of the pathway, but just leave the last step, and then you'd have, these things that are not illegal, but go 99% of the way there making psilocybin.
And you can learn how to do all this stuff if you come and join Bay Area mycology communities, because this is a community science panel, and ultimately, we want you guys to learn. So whatever your wildest dreams are, maybe we can help make them come true. Can everyone say your name and where people can find you, follow you, one more time?
Tony Alvarez, Shroomy Walkabout on IG, shroomywalkabout.com.
Damon Tighe on all the platforms, Damon Tighe.
Desert Alchemist, desert_alchemist on Instagram, and desertalchemist.com. Hernan Castro is my name.
And I'm Alan Rockefeller. I'm on all the platforms.
I'm Gordon Walker, and fascinated by fungi is my thing. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I think we'll hang around and take a couple of questions down there. But thank
you much.
Well done, guys. Thank you.